Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with our guest host, Anita Agrawal, and we thought we'd have a conversation on finding markets, on selling and exporting. So, Anita, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing, Luki?
I'm fantastic as always. So Anita joins us as the CEO of Jewels Forever. As for those that are joining us on video, can see in her background. And obviously she sells goods in the market. And we want to have a little bit of a conversation on selling. And for me, selling often has a bit of a dirty connotation, right? If you're kind of the shy introvert, nobody really wants to be sold to. But if you think about it, pretty much everything you do, you're selling someone on something, either to get a promotion, have your parents buy you a dog, or whatever it is, or convince someone to go to a particular restaurant and things like that. So I thought it'd be a good conversation to talk a little about that, and then add to that conversation like finding markets and your business is a bit on exporting as well. So we can touch a little bit on that. So could you tell us maybe a story about maybe what was the first sale that you remember, like any of the things from a selling perspective, either earlier or in your professional career? What was the first sale you remember?
Oh my goodness. You know what? This is a tricky one because I've been in business for so long. I don't actually remember. So when my parents, like my mom, when she first started our business, it was back in 1980. And, then she transformed the business and started a new business in 1991. And I would say at that time, we were actually doing a home-based business. So from 1991 till 1996, it was a home-based business. And at that time, I mean, the internet wasn't, it wasn't readily available to everybody. And at my home, we didn't even have a personal computer. So the way that you sold things was very different. And because we were a home-based business, we had like this 1-800 number where people could order stuff and then we would ship it out and package it. And I think that when I was 14, my parents started going on business trips. And so I would have to take some of the phone calls. And it was very intimidating because you didn't want the other person to know that you were a teenager. So you had to like act more mature than you were. So I had to like be very mature sounding. And the funny thing is then people would call back later and they're like, was that a child who like took our order? And my parents were like, no, that's our secretary. She just sounds really young. So yeah, it's interesting. There's like a lot of factors I think that come across in selling. And I think that was the biggest lesson that I learned at an early age is that when you're selling, a lot of it has to do with who you are. And there's many different things that you can do as a person and different techniques, sales techniques that you can employ based on who you are. Like some people do the soft sell. And I think what Luki, you're referring to is like this hard sell where, it's got this ick factor and, sometimes it can be cringy when people are like, this is going to change your life. You need to buy this. If you don't buy it today, you're going to miss out on the best opportunity. And I think that's the kind of cringe kind of sell that you would feel like, okay, that's a little much, right? And in some ways, like I am an extroverted person, but in some ways, like I do not like that approach at all. I'm all about the soft sell. I'm all about like building this relationship with the client. And I'm really honest with people. Like if I don't like a product that I carry, I'm like, you know what? This is not my favorite piece. However, you know what? Like it might be yours. And the funny thing is when you're honest with people, it actually really works for you. And when you do the soft sell approach, it really works for you. So anyways, yeah. So my first experience selling was on the phone.
That sounds good. And as part of that process, you talked about like kind of hard sell versus soft sell. So you're absolutely right, where it's kind of that hard sell, the high pressure, like you got to get this, act now, limited quantity supplies last, whatever are going out of stock and things like that, where it's almost like, oh, you feel dumb for not taking it. And then once you do buy it, it's kind of like that buyer's remorse. It's like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. Whereas the soft sell is a little bit more, okay, this is how it's going to add value to your life, why it's going to be a good choice for you, and yeah, it's my honest opinion on whether it's good or not or what have you. And hopefully from there, it's more than just the sale, it's also the building of the relationship, so that next time if I have a product that's of interest, that you might be interested in that one as well. Are there other aspects of sales and different techniques that you'd want to share with folks?
I'm not sure. We'll come back to this later. Yeah. Like I'll talk about some of the strategies that I've used, if that's okay, and like the processes of, maybe building a business and finding, ways to market and stuff.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess going on that vein, when was the first time you remember like consciously looking for a market? Because obviously when you're 14-year-old answering calls, people are just coming in and asking for this and that or what have you. But then now you have to, at some point, proactively go out and find these folks. So what was kind of that instance or an example of when you were consciously looking for a market?
Yeah, so I would say like the first thing that you need to do in terms of your own business at the beginning is to find a specialization for yourself. And this really is part of the process of finding clients, because if you know what your specialty is and what you're doing, it makes your life a lot easier. If you just randomly try to do lots of different things, and that's the thing, my company before, like when my parents first started it, they had to try a lot of different products and a lot of different things to figure out what their actual niche was. And sometimes that's by trial and error. But if you want to expedite that process, it's always best to like research, whether or not there is a market or a demand for the product that you have. So for me, number one thing is knowing what your specialty is, and then two, finding that market. And finding that market, it's definitely a multi-level kind of process to do this. First thing that I would say is find out what is the biggest event in your industry. What is the event like, and if it's in your budget, what is the biggest event in your industry? Whether that's in Las Vegas or whether that's in, Europe or in Asia, you have to invest to go to that event, because what you're going to do is you're going to go to this event and it'll be like a crash course in understanding your product and who the big players are, who is your competition. Like basically it's like a crash course in doing a SWOT analysis. So if you're not familiar with the SWOT analysis, that's examining your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what is the entire market about? Is there room for your product? Okay, so one way of determining your market is going to these trade shows. The nice thing about going to trade shows is that you're learning all of the stuff about that industry, you're learning about all the big players, but you're also meeting potential clients. And you're understanding what are like the benefits to your product versus other people's products. And I think that this works for services as well. And the nice thing about going to trade shows as well is that you're going there, and usually they have learning seminars and learning sessions by industry experts. So you get an opportunity to actually network with industry experts as well. So that's the first thing that I would do, is do your research. If you cannot afford to go to an actual event, you could do something a little bit easier. And that would be to go to the website of these events. And I mean, our business is 31 years old, so that wasn't a possibility for us when we started. But now you could just go to the website of the event, look at everybody that's exhibiting there, look at all the people that are sponsoring it, look at all the organizations and people that are presenting at that conference. And then you can start contacting these people or going to their websites to learn more about your industry. So I think it's a little bit easier now. But I would say, like, my second point is mostly do your research. And whether that's online research or whether that's in-person research, do your research.
Right. What I took from that is basically put in the work, because at some point some folks will hope, okay, I have something to bring to the world, I'll go out there and hope and pray versus the more legwork that you do up front, then you can really see, okay, this is how I position myself, how I brand myself compared to these other players, and who are the other players to begin with, and how do I differentiate, and that would be something for folks to think about. And would you mind taking us through kind of your journey in terms of some of the things that you considered, because you mentioned that your parents tried a whole bunch of things and then finally obviously settled on jewelry, at least for the foreseeable future. Who knows what the future has in store. But what was the process like, and what are some of the decisions that you made along the way to say, okay, we went here and we're not seeing as much traction. Oh, but this thing has promise, and maybe it achieved expectations or not. But could you guide us through that story?
Yeah, sure. So when my mom started in the 80s, what happened was she went to the Bay and she saw this like garnet rope necklace that was on at the Bay for $100. And she's like, wow. I literally could buy this retail in India for $3 on like the streets of India. Like, this is not, she's like, even if I was to sell this at $30, I would still make like 1,000% profit. So the next year, my mom went to India and she bought all these like different things, like gifts and like, back in the 80s, I don't know if you remember, but sequins was really in. Do you remember? Like, everything was bedazzled with like a lot of sequins
Sure.
and stuff. Okay. And like in butterfly motifs and stuff. So she bought all these like sequins purses and sequins dresses and stuff like that. And then she decided, on top of her 9 to 5 job, on the weekends, she would go to a flea market. And this was really a trial and error. So she found that, you know what, doing the giftware items like, you know, home decor, sequins dresses and stuff, those took a lot of space to store. And to store that in our house at that time, it was like taking up a whole room and our like entire garage. So slowly over time, she realized, well, actually, the best selling items and the most, you know, cost effective items are things that come in small packages, which was jewelry. And so she realized the transportation costs, the storage costs, all of this stuff was so greatly reduced when she had jewelry, and she was actually getting a little bit of a higher margin in that industry. So through trial and error, they finally decided to get into jewelry exclusively in 1991. And from there, it was another 10 years process to find their niche within the jewelry industry. So within any industry, you're always going to find that there's multiple categories. With our industry, there's fine jewelry, there's diamond category, there's gemstone category, there's gold jewelry, silver jewelry, platinum jewelry, I don't know, brass jewelry. There's just a lot of categories. And that process of narrowing our specialty down took us another 10 years. So,
okay. And then ultimately you settled on like what's kind of the value add that your jewelry provides?
So we actually settled on basically providing low-cost gold gemstone jewelry, which is a very specific niche, but also we are not like a high-end jeweler. We're more of like the kind of jewelry that you actually find in Walmart. So Walmart is one of my clients for their online platform. So yeah, so like we are doing low-cost jewelry that is fine jewelry, but it's all under $200. So we decided this is going to be our specialty, because everything else, anytime we tried something slightly different, it didn't work as well as this.
Sounds good. So you ended up with finding out, or your mom went abroad and found out kind of what was in, and maybe predicted what would be in as well. And then through trial and error and probably a little bit of kind of in your head analytics, figured out that what was moving well, smaller or transportation costs, storage costs, and things like that, and found that with the higher margins and with good volume, then that was something to consider. And obviously for other people who might be trying something else, it could be different for them as well. And then it was a journey of multiple decades, it sounds like, in order to actually say, you know what, we can provide affordable, high quality jewelry to folks. And yeah, it seems like that you've been finding success in there as well. So that sounds amazing. What sort of tips would you have? Well, obviously you already shared a couple, but tips that you'd have in kind of finding markets, selling, and even on the export side, because I know your business does a bit of that as well.
Yeah. So the other thing that I would say is that as much as, we look at like entrepreneurs as this solo creature who's like going out into the wilderness, creating something and like has done this all on their own, that is a complete and absolute myth. Okay. I would say that you really like any industry, anything that you want to do, you have to find a community. And so, what I would say to anybody who wants to get into business or entrepreneurship is find a community of people who are in that industry or even outside of that industry so that you can learn and grow and create opportunities for yourself. So, for example, I'm a member of the Canadian Jewelers Association, the American Gem Trade Association, and the Quebec Jewelers Association. So, not only do joining professional organizations, not only does it help you with your growth journey and learning about what the current market trends are, but also learning about what the laws and rules and regulations in your industry are, you also get opportunities to sell and network with people and meet other folks. The other thing that I do is I'm actually a member of industry associations that are small business associations. So you could do this with your local BIA, Business Improvement Association. You could do this with regional boards of trade. So I'm a member of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. You could find specialized organizations. In the past, I've been members of women's business networks and Organization of Women in International Trade, which I was also the president of for 4 years. So if you find different business associations, the nice thing about that is you can learn sales techniques, marketing techniques. You can learn from other people's experiences, and you can find mentors. So a mentor in business doesn't necessarily have to be in your particular field. They could be in another industry, but help you learn about sales and general business techniques. So that's my really big tip is build a network for yourself, whether that's in business or whether that's in your specific industry. You have to find like-minded people.
Sounds good. So my take on that is for entrepreneurs that are looking to kind of accelerate or really find that market for their product, then they need to create basically an interesting Venn diagram of a whole bunch of things where there's kind of the domain and what you're selling. There's like the industry and even geography of areas that could help out. There could be specialized organizations in whatever demographic that you might be part of as well. And if you can find a couple of other ones where there's, I guess, no shortage of different groups and organizations out there, if there's some sort of relationship, you could potentially learn from them. And there could be something where that might be a new niche or a different niche, what do you call it, like blue sky or blue ocean, that sort of thing, that is an untapped market. So go out there and kind of put in the work. Don't necessarily just settle on like the usual suspects and explore out there. And then who knows what sort of meaningful connections you'll be able to build there.
And like, so for my industry associations that I joined that are particular to my industry, it also helps you establish credibility, right? So when you're a member of the Canadian Jewelers Association, when stores and clients and retailers and stuff, consumers look at that you're a member of that organization, that means that you have a certain level of credibility. That means that people know who you are. So you've established that. Joining industry, like different industry associations, like a women's business enterprise network, such like things like that, you can actually find clients who aren't actually in your field. So the funny thing is a lot of my clients will be like, you're actually a jeweler to non-jewelers. So I sell to a lot of web platforms. I sell to businesses that might have jewelry just as a product. I sell my jewelry to cosmetic companies. So these are like basically I'm cross-pollinating with completely different industries, but because of my expertise in jewelry, I'm able to sell to them. So yeah.
Yeah, so that just kind of shows where you never know where the opportunity is, so kind of keep your options open. I'm wondering if you comment a little bit about kind of selling B2B versus B2C, so business to business versus business to customer, because I think it sounds like you mentioned one of the big box retailers as one of your clients, that's a B2B play. But I do believe you also sell to the individual consumers as well, right?
Yeah.
How is that different in your mind?
So I would say like 99.9% of my business is B2B. And my B2C component is really just online. And it's not something that's taken off greatly, but I can definitely comment on both of them. So B2B, definitely, I would say credibility is the biggest thing. People want to know, like, my stuff is all made right here in Canada. I design it myself. People really want to know that they can trust you because their company's name and reputation rides on whether or not your product is authentic and whether or not your product is all the things that you claim it to be, right? Whereas with both with B2B and B2C, I would say it is about the relationship that you create with people, especially if you want to be in any industry for a long time. So relationship management is really important. Ultimately, I would say for both B2C and B2B, your clients want to feel special. They want to feel like you've done something unique for them, you've done something nice for them, and that you actually value and care about that relationship. With B2C, because it's relatively a new space for me, I would say I haven't been so good at it yet. That's going to take time for me to develop, but constantly keeping in touch with people. And I find that in some ways it's nicer and easier to do this now, like post 2005, than it has been ever, because there's so many ways to interact with your client. You can do that through social media. You could do that through videos. You could do that through, adverts online. There's so many ways to do it, newsletters, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I totally agree that, well, in any kind of quote unquote selling relationship, it's really the relationship, right? You need to develop trust, whether it's a company or a consumer. They need to trust that you're giving them what they want and it's going to meet all their expectations. And for your B2C sales, well, it's still being incubated and nurtured, so maybe we'll get an update on how that's doing later on, if that's even a focus, because you might even decide it's not worth the effort. But for someone who's an entrepreneur selling a product and getting into the industry, are there any other tips in addition to what you provided so far that you would give for someone that's kind of selling goods or looking for a market out there?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that I could say that every single entrepreneur needs to have now is some kind of internet presence. And I am not like exaggerating when I say I have a lot of clients, because I sell B2B, who still to this day don't have any internet presence. And the clients that I know that do have internet presence and who have a lot of Google reviews and other types of reviews, they are the ones who have kind of been able to navigate this pandemic a lot better than clients who don't. Because a lot of people, while they not necessarily had to be shopping online, a lot of people, that's how they do their research now. So if they see that you have a website or that you have some kind of web presence, whether that's social media, they feel like that sense of trust and credibility again, right? And if you don't have any of that, then it's probably going to be a lot harder for you.
For sure. And where I remember hearing that is a friend was looking to buy something and they were researching the company and they had like zero website, zero anything, and like, is this like a spam company, because they don't even have anything online. So at least a simple website, it doesn't even have to be anything too extravagant, I think it is good. And then obviously if you can build all the socials on top of that, then that would be helpful as well. And as we kind of close this off, are there any other parting words or words of wisdom for selling goods or looking for a market that you'd want to share?
Yes, it's a lot of trial and error. I think that in some ways doing business has never been as easier as it is now, but also it's never been as harder. So in some ways, like the overhead associated with starting a business can be a lot now. Okay. Especially if you're in the product space. So your overhead can be quite a bit. The other thing is that landscape is changing drastically, right? And you have a lot more competition. So while you might have a website, there might be like tons of other websites, and there might be products that are similar to yours, but maybe not at that same level in terms of quality, but people might opt for that based on price. So there is a lot of competition, but at the same time, when I say it's never been easier, it's so much easier to reach out to potential clients. Thanks to these same web technologies. Yeah. So, yeah.
Sounds good. So for those trying to venture out into the entrepreneurial world on the product space, go and give it a shot, right? Obviously, don't kind of bet the house, bet the farm on it, right? Because you obviously want to mitigate that risk. But it is, as you said, easier because there's all these like online platforms and Shopify sites that you can create, and with SEO then you can kind of get noticed fairly quickly. But it's such a crowded landscape that everybody is doing that, right? So you have to kind of almost stay one step ahead of everybody else in order to do that. And if you, as you mentioned earlier, kind of niche yourself down and really add value in a particular space, then you can always take that space and expand it, right? So and hopefully get I think in marketing they have like the 1,000 true fans or something like that people that really kind of speak to and advocate your product, and those people will help you kind of build your brand.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what? That leads me to one more point. There's a saying that, 20% of people that are your clients make up 80% of your sales. And I really believe that's true. So, building those relationships with the same clients over and over, it's invaluable, especially in the long run. So.
For sure, yeah. Back to the 80-20 rule. It applies in sales and marketing and all that sort of stuff as well, and finding your market. So thanks so much, Anita, for sharing your tips and strategies and insights on selling goods, on finding your market, and a little bit on the export side. And hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the SWOT, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.